Welcome back to the program. Let's go to our panel. Former Liberal MP Jason Falinski and former political advisor, Chief of Staff to Bill Shorten, Ryan Liddell. Gents, great to see you both. Ryan, in your home state, Good. Let's start there with the Senate results I just went through with Tom Connell. The sixth spot to a young 21-year-old, turned 21 on election day. It is quite extraordinary the extent to which the Labor result continues to broaden and strengthen, even in the Senate.
Oh, that's all true, Kieran. And Charlotte Walker, who you referred to just before, will do a tremendous job representing South Australia in the Senate. And one of the untold sort of stories, well, sorry, not as often told story about the last election result was that obviously there was a thumping majority to the ALP in the House of Representatives, but there was almost at last count, I think, a 5% swing across the Senate, which means that the numbers in the Senate are much better for the government heading into the next parliament. And it's really interesting sort of stat that I looked up on the way into the studio here this morning, Kieran, was looking at the young person vote, the result from the election on May the 3rd. The latest Redbridge poll heading into that election had 2PP at 61.5% to the ALP versus 39.5% to the coalition. Now, with those sort of numbers, it really says something about the coalition. They're not talking to young people when you've got, you know, the average age of membership in the Liberal Party at 70 years old for members. I'm not sure a whole lot of young people sort of look at that and think, wow, this is a party that represents me. So it really is good to see such a young person elected into the Senate representing South Australia for the ALP.
Jason, I know it's something that you've spoken about quite a bit. In fact, we've discussed the whole issue of empowering people. Home ownership's a big one. But that critical point, and I think you'd agree with it to an extent, is that to broadening into folks on millennials, Gen Z, and one of the policies that I think was a sleeper issue in this campaign was Jason Clare's, he led the policy, but it was reducing the HECS debt by 20%. I had it raised with me by various people in the days leading up to the campaign. A loved one said to me, a young relative said, I said, which way are you voting? They said, oh, Labor. And I said, why? And they said, well, between me and my fiancée, we save $50,000 on our HECS debt, Jason.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kieran. And it's not that we have lost support, funnily enough, of young people. It's that we've stopped talking to them. And that's a real problem. And what we have seen in North America, Pierre Poilievre, who recently lost to Mark Carney, but the Conservative Party in Canada actually won votes amongst people under the age of 45 by stressing basically all those issues, home ownership and also the cost of education and over-credentialisation in modern economies. So that really resonated with young people. It's consistent with Liberal values, and it's something that we really needed to be talking a lot more about in the lead up to the last election, but didn't. And, you know, you have to ask yourself consistently, if you're a member of the Liberal Party, if you were feeling, you know, a 22-year-old Australian who just finished university, what are the three reasons you would vote for the Liberal Party? And if you can't answer that question, then we have work to do. And I think, sadly, during the last election, we really couldn't answer that question.
Yeah, and that was that was that issue of home ownership, the HECS debt, and so on. But even just the campaigning strategies via social media and all that sort of stuff. But we can get into that at another point, because I do want to ask you about the Prime Minister. He's in Taree today, Ryan. And I guess this is the flip side of it. You know, you have a big win. You can't be out there popping champagne. You've got to show the Australian people this is what it's about. We've got to get back to work. That's got to be the message, because we all know, you know, Jason knows and I do, that this cycle turns and it can turn quick. You've got to remain vigilant in this game. Otherwise, it can turn pretty quickly in terms of opinion towards you and your role and your leadership.
I don't think anyone in the ALP is complacent, Kieran, but to your point about the PM being in Taree today, I mean, this is what Prime Ministers do. Like in times of crisis, national emergencies, they're on the ground, seeing what's happening and seeing what support they can provide. You know, flying to Hawaii or jumping on a plane to Sydney to go to a fundraising dinner with Justin Hems. They should be on the ground doing these sorts of things. And the contrast between, the coalition, members of the National Party fighting over spoils, whether they're part of the Liberal Party, not part of the Liberal Party, doing daily press conferences in the halls of the press gallery, contrasted with people in regional Australia suffering through some pretty horrific sort of floods up on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. Couldn't be starker. And you'd think if you're a member of the public up there suffering through that, looking at representatives for the National Party playing the games that they're playing in Canberra, you might have a bit of buyer's regret. I would have thought in the way that you voted on the 3rd of May.
Jason, do you cut them all a little bit of slack given how the shock that there would have been at the result, because it was such a big loss? Is that what has sparked this sort of introspection and an internal blue between the Libs and Nats, and more broadly within the Libs yourself, as you're trying to sort of grapple with what the party needs to be for the future?
Look, Kieran, in terms of Anthony Albanese going to Taree, I mean, it's authentic. And as Mae West said, if you can fake authenticity, you've got it made. So, that's what he's done. He's gone there, and as Ryan points out, as opposed to going to Hawaii, for example. But look, our only road back to salvation is through discipline, focus, and courage. And you keep cutting people slack for 3 years, and the 3 years before that, and the 3 years before that, and it's all getting just a bit too much. And I think for Liberals like myself, who have just watched this over and over again, we're all getting a bit sick of it. So, in the words of Ted Lasso, it's okay to be sad. Let's be sad together. But tomorrow we've got to move forward. And this has been really 3 weeks of self-inflicted indulgence and not the sort of values and characteristics that we should be showing the Australian people if we're serious about governing for all Australians.
Well, you've made my day, Jason, with a reference to Ted Lasso, and Ryan, great to see you as well. Thanks, gentlemen. We'll see you soon. Appreciate it.